Welcome to the Sharpway Show. Thank you so much for giving me a chunk of your evening. It is a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast, so yeah, you're looking at me. That's kind of how the rules work. You kind of have to do that. I know you might be saying, Larry, I could be doing something else, but nothing as fun as this, so stop fooling yourself and do me a small favor. If you happen to be watching this on Twitter right now, and I hope you are on the Sharpway Twitter, then retweet this so that other people can see it and go, oh my God, Larry Sharp's going to have somebody cool on. I want to be able to talk to him and stuff. So don't be selfish and instead retweet. You know it's going to be good. So then like it. Click that like button. I don't see any popping up. What's wrong with you? Click the like button already. Why are you looking at me? Click that like button. It does matter. I do appreciate it. It gets me around those algorithms that constantly are punishing us all. Today, I have a great person with me today. Someone who has been fighting the good fight, believe it or not, for our kids, and not just going, what about the children? Literally figuring out what about the children, and then allowing you as a parent or as a guardian to figure out what's best for your kids. And we're going to ask a bunch of questions today. He is a senior fellow at the American Federation for Children, the man, the myth, the legend, Corey DeAngelis. How are you, sir?
Hey, doing well. Thanks for having me, Larry.
Of course. And for those of you who want to see what he's doing and follow him, you can. Over at Twitter, it's DeAngelis Corey. If you're listening to this, it is D-E, Angelis with an I, so A-N-G-E-L-I-S C-O-R-E-Y. So that's his Twitter. And if you want to follow him, otherwise you can. FederationForChildren.org. And that 4 is not the number 4. It is the word F-O-R, FederationForChildren.org. So Corey, I got to give you what I think is the most controversial question up front. A lot of people think that the COVID lockdowns, while short run, devastating for our kids, long run was actually a benefit. Am I wrong?
Yeah, well, when you look at education freedom, it's been a benefit. The teachers unions overplayed their hand, and they're basically actively destroying their own empire at this point. They pushed to close the schools. The teachers unions, the AFT, the NEA, they lobbied the CDC to keep the schools closed as long as possible. Yep. And I don't blame the people in the system. I blame the system itself and the messed up set of incentives that are baked into that system. I mean, just think about it. The private schools were fighting to reopen. Even one private school in California, for example, in Sacramento County, there was a ridiculous health order that applied to schools, but not to daycare centers. So if the virus is really smart, it knew if you were learning something, it was going to get you. But if you were just in a daycare, not actually doing the important stuff of learning, then it wasn't going to get you. The private school understood that this was absurd. They rebranded themselves as a daycare by retraining all of their employees instead of being teachers as daycare workers. Wow. And they got the schoolwork done. They kept their customers. And that's the rational set of incentives that they were responding to in the private sector. They knew if they closed their doors in the short term, they'd probably have to be closed for good. But the public school teachers unions knew they could keep the benefits the same in terms of job security and pay while not having to go back to work in person. But it was even worse than that. They actually financially benefited from keeping their doors closed for so long because they could say, look, we're closed because we don't have enough money. And it worked out for them. They got $190 billion in so-called COVID relief funding since March of 2020, most of which hasn't been spent yet, and most of which wasn't contingent upon actually reopening the schools. And this is the same story we've seen for decades. The test scores haven't gotten better. And the government schools, when they do a bad job, they just say, well, we're failing because you only increased our funding by 152% since 1970 after adjusting for inflation. You should have given us even more, and maybe we'll do better next time. That next time never comes. We throw more money into the system. But the silver lining, which is what you were getting at, is that families saw that the school system doesn't give a crap about them. All of the private sector businesses were opening. The private schools were opening. The daycares were open. The teachers were from the public school system were at the grocery stores. You had the Chicago Teachers Union board member vacationing in Puerto Rico in person, obviously, while railing against going back to work in person. You had the Chicago Teachers Union overplaying its hand by tweeting that reopening schools was somehow sexist, racist, and misogynist. They were throwing up in all the buzzwords to try to not go back to work. Parents saw what was happening right before their eyes, but they also saw with this remote learning, which I would just call remotely learning. It wasn't that great. I mean, there was just so much nonsense going on with not a great way to transmit information.
I had 2 kids in the system at the time. I saw it.
And it just didn't work out. And look, and the politicians had endless hypocrisy too. You had Gavin Newsom complaining about Zoom school while sending his kids to private school as if that he had to go through it. He was totally gaslighting the public. So the hypocrisy was endless, but parents got to see what was happening in the classroom. And parents who thought their kids were in great public schools based on test scores started to see another dimension of school quality that was more important, which is whether the school's curriculum aligned with their values. So the families who were in A-rated schools started to say, this isn't actually an A-rated school. My kid's getting brainwashed to hate me for 13 years of their life. And that's more likely to mobilize parents to push for school choice than anything else. Test scores are one thing, but if you're a parent with a kid in a school that has great test scores already, oh, well, parents started to see, and as Vodi Bakum said it best, we must stop. We cannot continue sending our children to Caesar and act surprised when they come home as Romans. The good news is parents aren't surprised anymore, and they're pushing for change. We had 2021 was the year of school choice. We had the biggest single year victory of school choice legislation in U.S. history. 19 states expanding or enacting programs to fund students as opposed to systems. And then in 2022,
I love you always say that. Don't. Well, hold on. You always say fund the student, not the system. I just love that idea. I'm sorry, keep going.
That's right. And I know I'm rambling a lot on this first question, but it's because we have so much good news in 2022.
Well, I'm just going to steal it from you and probably not give you any credit whatsoever. I'm just going to act like I made it up. It's fine.
I'll take it. But in 2022, look, after all these states had the victories in 2021, Arizona just went all in. You had them pass the most expansive school choice program ever. It's not targeted to any certain populations. It's every single family. This is what we've been fighting for decades. Right. This is what Milton Friedman envisioned. Every family, regardless of income, regardless of background, regardless of zip code, they can take their kids' state-funded education dollars to whatever education provider works best for them. That could be the public school. If you like your government school, you can keep your government school. But if not, you can take that money.
I agree. I mean,
elsewhere.
I think you look at some libertarians who will say, just end all the government schools. And I think in the long run, that might happen. Who knows? And that may not be a bad idea. But I think what we have to accept is, what do we have now? And we have a situation to where the vast majority of parents still want to have a government school. Was it 90% of kids are still in government schools? Something like that, right? That's right. Huge number. So we've got to make it to where at least they see another option to where they get. I feel like the thing I love also is I feel like most parents, and I felt this too as when I was younger. Now I don't. But sometimes parents feel trapped or they feel helpless. Like, I've got to put my kid into the school that's across the street. And if the school sucks, I'm screwed. There's nothing I can do. But you brought up a phrase which I love. It's the idea of a parental revolution, which then says that the special interests that are in the schools you just talked about, you just gave a bunch of special interests, that we're going to now make parents just like a special interest group.
Yeah, the main problem in K-12 education is that for far too long, the only special interests represented the adults in the system. Yeah, the teachers unions, the superintendents associations. I had just listed on Twitter the other day the Texas superintendent salaries. The president of the United States has a salary of about $400,000 a year. There were a handful of Texas superintendents with much higher salaries than $400,000 a year, and many in the 300,000s. It's like
New York too.
Teachers aren't getting paid enough, but it's because it's going towards administrative bloat and it's going towards political activity. It's not making its way into the classroom. Monopolies have no incentive to spend money wisely. So whenever they get more money pumped into the school system, teacher salaries since 1970 have remained relatively flat, about 8% increase. but they've increased spending by about 152% in real terms. It's going towards just putting more people into the buildings. It's a jobs program for adults, not an education initiative for kids, but that means more dues paying members for union bosses like Randy Weingarten, who make over $500,000 a year over at the American Federation of Teachers. But again, the good news is that there's a new special interest group in town. Parents have woken up. They're never going back to sleep. And the teachers unions have awoken this parent revolution that we've all been waiting for. And it's becoming politically profitable for politicians to support education freedom because parents who are pushing back.
So let me go down that road. Hold on. You're going too far. You're gonna pull my audience down a road before I can wrap it up. Let me touch a couple of these. The first thing I want to bring up is the idea of teacher salaries, right? A lot of people think when you talk about school choice, their feeling is, see, guys like Corey and Larry, they hate teachers. That's what it is. But you bring up a very valid point, which I brought up in the past also, which is I don't want teachers' salaries to go down. I want the reverse. I want teachers who, in my view, and I think most would agree, they're providing the most value in the system versus an administrator. Now, again, we do need administrators, 100%. But I remember, I'm in my 50s. I remember when I was in school, you had like one principal, like four vice principals, and my school had like 2,000 kids in it. Like I had a big school. I'm in New York. I had a big school, like 2,000 kids in my school. So we had like one principal, like four vice principals, and an office staff and some custodial staff. That was the entire school. Now you got like 9 vice principals just in one, school without 500 people in it. And we want to have more teachers teaching, giving more money going to them who are providing value, and then a few administrators who you do need, right? They should get paid. You need administrators. But we have places in New York State. I don't know if Texas follows this, but in New York State, we have districts where there's more administrators than teachers.
That's insane. I mean, if you look nationwide, the trends are clearly that the amount of administrators going into the system and support staff far outpaces the growth in teachers. For example, the latest data that I've seen from the Federal National Center for Education Statistics finds that nationwide since 2000, the number of teachers in the system have increased by about 7 or 8%, aligned with the amount of student enrollment increasing over that period, about 7 or 8%. But the amount of assistant principals and principals have increased by about 33% over that period, much higher. And the amount of administrators and other support staff have increased by about 80 to 90%. So this is all going towards the top, towards administrative bloat. And again, it's because the government school system, it's a monopoly that's bad for families, but it's also a monopsony that's bad for the employees who are actually doing a good job. Competition in the market for goods and services is good for families. Competition in the labor market is good for teachers. And we actually have 5 studies on this topic that I've reported in a blog called School Choice Benefits Teachers Too at the Washington Examiner. All 5 of these studies find that private and charter school competition, obviously it leads to benefits for families because they're voluntarily selecting these institutions, but the competition leads to higher teacher salaries in the public school system too, because their employers, the districts, start to say, well, if we don't want to lose our customers, we better put the money into wiser investments. What better way to do that than to put it towards the teachers? And all 5 of those studies point towards.
And you might actually, one of the number one reasons why teachers leave is not because they hate the students or whatever. It's because they don't get to teach because of administrative issues. Admin and administrators is why many teachers are leaving the field, not because the kids are so rough or something. I mean, that's an issue also. Kids are always an issue, obviously, but that's not the major reason. So if you actually had less administrators, less strings attached, you'd keep better teachers in the field itself, and then you'd be able to get teachers to the right schools because the better teachers would get paid more. You'd want to recruit those teachers into your school so parents would want to stay, all those things. But this brings up my other... I'm sorry, go ahead.
We haven't even gotten into like all of these alternative forms of education that could be beneficial for teachers too.
Don't go there yet. Hold on. Wait. You're going too fast. Okay. So I want to stay on this piece though. And the piece I want to stay on here is if we had this happening, we would have more teachers staying and also more people wanting to be teachers, right? Because there'd be more respect, more money. The problem that I have in New York, and I'm assuming that other states are similar, is because you have so many administrators, you have so many rules and regulations and things you must do. So now in New York, we force our teachers to literally get master's degrees and to go off and get credentials and all types of things. So now I'm a person who says, I want to make a difference. I want to go teach. So I go off and get all these degrees. I get I do all the work required that you want me to do. I get credentialing. I get, classroom time, the whole deal. And now I show up and you don't let me teach. Instead, you give me a series of things that I must do, and I'm not even allowed to teach anymore. If that's the case, right? If you're going to do that, don't credential your teachers then. Just pull people with high school diplomas and treat them like, robots and tell them what to do. And that's it. So we're doing exactly the worst. We're forcing teachers to go into serious debt, to jump through hoops to be a teacher, and then we give them no freedom to teach. It drives me insane.
Yeah, I mean, the academic evidence is pretty, and take it with a grain of salt. It's a pretty biased field. It's pretty much 99% of people who disagree with me in the peer review process in education academia. But even them find that these credentialing systems don't lead to better academic outcomes if a teacher has a master's degree, for example, or if they've gone through the certification requirements. So you're restricting the supply of labor. You're making the teachers jump through a lot of hoops. And you're keeping out a lot of people who might have done a good job, who would have, let's say, someone that's older who retired from being someone who works in biology or an engineer and wants to go teach math. If they're not allowed to do that, or if it's very costly for them to do so, you're restricting a lot of talent from entering the market too. And look, this is just a lot of reasons why the whole system needs revamping.
I wouldn't be against an individual school deciding they want higher qualifications, because that might be valid, right? They might be important. Maybe you do want something like that, but your qualification, to your point, might be different. I might want someone who has had experience in the field to be a teacher, right? I may not care to have a master's degree, or I might care you have to have a basic degree and 5 years doing the thing, right? I probably want that person to come in and show me, here's how you actually use math in the real world. Not just, I'm going to tell you some math stuff that you can't figure out why to use it. And now you're a kid, you don't care about it, right? One of the things I've done with my own daughter is we've done homeschooling. I've done all the things. I've done private school, public school, homeschooling, everything. So when I would teach her stuff, I'd say, here's how you actually use this stuff in reality. And my daughter would go, oh, this makes sense now. Yes, because there's some value behind it. So I think a lot of teachers who've had the experience you talked about would make that happen. They would actually show, hey, this degree will get you a job in this field. There's some value in this.
And we talked a lot about the administrative blow, a way to cut a lot of these unnecessary expenses. And I don't know what the magic number is of how many administrators you need. I don't know how much should be allocated towards buildings. The reality is it's probably different for different demand and desires on the part of the customers in different areas. But we've seen,
and even the real estate. Like a Manhattan school is going to be different, right, than a suburban school or whatever. Sure.
And so what we're seeing in some places like Arizona that have had school choice kind of blossoming over the past couple of decades is they have something called education savings accounts, kind of like the voucher idea with the money that would have followed you to the public school. You could take it to a private school if you wanted to pay for tuition and fees. But in Arizona, they're using these education savings accounts where that money that would have followed you to the government school, you could still take it there if you want. If not, it goes into this family-directed education savings account for each individual child. It's about $7,000 per year in Arizona. It's higher or lower depending on your state. But you could also use it for these micro schools, or when the schools closed, they had these pandemic pods where 5 to 10 children were getting together in a household.
Hold on. Tell me what a micro, is that what a micro school is? Pods?
Yes. Yeah. They started calling them pandemic pods when the government schools were closed. It's a really interesting lesson in spontaneous order. When the government stops providing something, if the demand is still there, families will figure out a way to make it happen. And it's easier for families to kind of achieve what they want if the funding is following their student. And so in Arizona, they have these Prenda micro schools, for example, is one of the big providers. Families are already using the education savings account funding to pay for the Prenda micro schools there. I think there's some in Florida.
By the way, that's against the law in New York State, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, New York State.
You can't do it in New York State. We're the worst. We're the absolute worst.
I mean, they're coming after the Jewish schools, right? Without even having school choice programs. They're trying to regulate private education. That seems like it's against the constitutional case from
what is that thing you just said? Const to what? What's that? I'm a New Yorker. I don't know
Yeah,
what that
is
means.
that? Yeah, the New
I
York
don't know.
State, they say
We don't know
whatever
what
they
that is.
want it to mean.
Yes.
But look, in 1925, in Pierce versus Society of Sisters, the Supreme Court in the majority opinion said that the child is not the mere creature of the state. Because Oregon tried to outlaw, or they successfully outlawed private education in 1922. Took 3 years for the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn that ruling.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes. So whenever people try to say, oh, well, school choice sounds great, but it might lead to government control of private education, I'll say government can control private education already. Look what they did in Oregon. Look what they're doing in New York City right now with the Jewish schools, or at least trying to do, to have a, what is it, a substantially equivalent to their public school system. A lot of these families are like, I don't want substantial equivalents to the public school system. I want better. I want my values in the school, not this Marxist stuff that's going on in the public schools.
Why are you insulting me by doing that? Absolutely. So,
exactly.
Yes,
and it's go ahead.
Let me grab a couple comments. People are commenting a little bit. So I want to grab a couple of them if I could. One of them is just nice. This is Sam says, the best part of my day. Thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. That's awesome. I do appreciate that. Pete, of course, does this every single show, and you put it up perfectly. He does the debt. 31,319,544,673,024.08. And with that in mind, let's throw more at education.
Larry, I couldn't read that. I went to government schools. I don't know how you did it.
There we go. Absolutely, yes. So Joel goes on to say, the answer for politicians is always more funding. But this is the point you brought up. You said, if I remember right, you just said it was 152% increase in school funding. Is that right?
Since 1970, adjusted for inflation on a per student basis.
So in New York State, we are going out of our way to help you out with that, because we're already at over $29,000 per kid already. We're the highest in the entire country. And to your point, though, we never rank top 10, ever. In fact, if you take away a college and just make it K through 12, we never rank in the top half. Usually we rank in the bottom 10. And we have the most in the country. Literally the highest in the country. And we usually rank in the bottom. In graduation, I think we're 42nd. And in I think early education, we're like 44th. We are terrible in everything. It's horrible.
And New York City spends over $35,000. The city spends over $35,000.
The city's higher. If you average the state's 29, the city's over 30. Yeah,
that's just an enormous amount of money. I mean, think about it. Over 13 years for K through 12, that's $455,000. Imagine if you gave that money to the parents. They could figure it out. I mean, are the kids getting an education worth $455,000? I'm not quite sure. Even if you gave the parents $400,000, save the taxpayers $55,000 per student.
Absolutely.
I'm sure the parents would be able to. And look, you could even stipulate that they spend it on education for homeschool curriculum, but even if you didn't, they can't do much worse than what's happening in a lot of the public schools. I
would argue if you gave them half, if you literally said, hey, parent, here's $14,000, 1 year, pick a school, pick a curriculum, hire a teacher, do the thing you want to do, you would have a better outcome than what we have now. I completely agree with you. It's totally true. But let me walk down that road a bit further. In New York State, I'm sure this is across the rest of the country, but there has been a huge explosion in homeschooling and things like, even fighting against the state, doing it anyway. The state makes you jump through hoops. The state is terrible. The state does not want you to homeschool. New York State wants to control your kids desperately. And people are still doing it. Even against this, they're trying to do it anyway. With that happening, I can't imagine that the unions will just be quiet. Tom brings up, he says, probably won't hear much from teachers union here. I think the opposite. I think the teachers union are going to see this happening and they're going to say, wait a minute. These guys like Corey, they're taking our money. We got a grift here. We got to make cash. I got a $500,000 salary, a $400,000 salary. I'm not letting Corey take that. So I'm going to have to do something about this. How are they going to fight back? What can we expect? Or do you know or not know?
They're already doing
what
it.
Can we expect? They are.
They are afraid. They're continuing the fear mongering, saying this is going to destroy the public schools, which never happens. We've had a lot of expansion of school choice. The public schools never get worse. They get better. We have so much evidence on this topic. 26 of 29 studies. That one just came out, another positive one the other day, finding positive effects of private school choice competition on the outcomes in the public schools. But look, they'll use whatever they can. They'll use fear mongering. They'll lobby in state capitals all across the country, and they use their extorted money from the tax system to pay to lobby to trap kids in failing government schools that they staff. I mean, it's just so sickening just to think about what they're fighting for exactly. You have kids who don't want to be in these institutions, the poor kids in particular. The most advantaged can already get out of these schools because they can pay out of pocket for private schools.
They're wealthy. They can go where they want.
They can move somewhere else that has a better public school. But you have lobbyists from the teachers unions at these state capitals saying, "Nuh-uh, those are my kids, and that money that is attached to those kids that we are failing, we're going to fight to make sure that your kids stay put and never have a chance at success and never have a way out." They'll lobby at the capitals. They'll donate to political candidates who support trapping kids in failing government schools.
Well, let me go there real fast. You brought this up, and this is something that was shocking as I did some homework on this, which was Republicans have been talking about school choice literally for decades, right? I mean, since like Reagan. I mean, I can remember. I mean, for decades about school choice, but until recently, the Republican talk has been good, but their action has been garbage. They have not been good on school choice until recently. Recently, been much better recently. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Republicans have been better in the last couple of years. But if you go before, say, 2020, 2019, it has not been an impressive record. Has it been because of the money that goes into their pockets from these special interests?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One is that the only special interests were the employees in the system. Now that the Republicans are kind of taking the side of parents as this other special interest group that could help them at the ballot box too. And the education freedom candidates did very well during the midterms. For example, there wasn't a red wave like people were expecting. There wasn't a blue wave, obviously, but there was a school choice wave. 76% of the candidates supported by my organization won their races in 2022. So we did really well. And you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, you might say, hey, you're biased. You're from AFC. Of course, you're going to tout your record. But we also took out 40 of the 69 incumbents that we targeted, which is one of the hardest things to do in politics.
It's impossible to do. Wow.
And you don't have to take my word for it. You can look at the liberal tiers in the New Yorker magazine. The authors lamented that education freedom candidates fared depressingly well in the midterms. And, they could just go cry harder because that's bad news for socialists who want to control other people's kids, but it's good news for parents. And so as far as Republicans kind of doing better recently, I think part of it has to do with the school closures and the curriculum being exposed. So like when you're fighting, when the argument is just based on low test scores, one, there's not as much urgency, but it becomes less of kind of like a party-based issue, even though it was always, it for a long time has been on the Republican Party platform. There's more urgency. There's a stronger Republican case to be made, when they're arguing against critical race theory and gender ideology in the classroom. I mean, the Republicans, some have done this other thing where they do a top-down approach where they try to just ban all these. I call that playing a form of whack-a-mole because it's a one-size-fits-all system, and no matter what you ban, the fights are always going to change.
Let me touch that piece if I could. I love that you brought that up because a lot of people like when people like Ron DeSantis will ban things in Florida. And I didn't like that. I didn't like top-down at all, even banning stuff. I was like, I don't want top-down. And I live in New York City. So there are some people who want their kids to learn CRT. They want it, right? They're happy. They're like, please give me more, give me more. They want it. Sure. Who am I to tell you that you can't teach your kid that? If you think I don't know, but that's me, right? So if you think that's good for your kid, you should be able to. Just don't force my kid.
And
right?
So I'm totally with you.
The idea of top-down doesn't work, but you bring up a point that I just love, the concept of bottom-up accountability being far much stronger and more effective than top-down accountability.
Yeah, this form of whack-a-mole with the bans, the argument's always going to change. The Common Core battles of yesterday are the CRT battles of today. Next, we've already shifted towards the gender stuff has been more in the news than the CRT stuff. But at the end of the day, like even if you weren't aligned, like if you weren't of the view that like let's say you're a person who just really hates CRT. There's an implementation and enforceability issue with the top-down bills as well, because we have a lot of video evidence that's already come out from an organization called Accuracy in Media. They've exposed administrators in the public school system in Idaho, Iowa, and Tennessee. And a little birdie tells me they might have more videos coming out soon from states that have banned CRT. And then the administrators are just saying, well, we're just going to call it social emotional learning. We're going to do it anyway. No one can really see what we're doing.
Wait. You just listed 3 red states.
Yeah. And they're doing it anyway. It's happening everywhere. And so even if your sole purpose is to get rid of CRT, if that's something that you really like, let's just let's just assume that's a good thing to do, whether you agree with it or not. Your proposed solution is not a real solution. It doesn't actually achieve what you would like to happen. School choice from the bottom up allows for more freedom and accountability at the same time.
Yes.
If you want to take your kid to a school that teaches CRT, fine, but don't force my kid to do it. And then at the same time, I think organically, if families have more of a choice, then the public schools will have a stronger incentive to focus on the basics as opposed to anything too far left or too far right, because parents mostly just want education for the most part.
Sure.
There are some parents that kind of want some ideological stuff, but for the most part, the competitive incentive is to respond in a way to where you're focusing more on math, reading, and writing, as opposed to anything that might be seen as being biased from a political standpoint.
Well, the other part you bring up is if the money just follows the kid, then the federal strings attached don't have as much power, right? So now if I have an administrator who says you have to teach to the test, which is common, if the local school says, I don't care about the testing, doesn't matter to me. My parents don't care about testing. My parents would rather have shop and home ec and, things like that, civics. That's not on the test. So we don't care. We're going to opt out of the testing because we don't care, because my parents don't care. Not because these don't care, because the parents don't care. We want this. A school could do that. I think it would change everything. And you'd have a lot. And something else. Parents would see, wow, little Jane, little John, they come out of school and they're rocking and rolling. My kid's in the wrong school. This stuff isn't working. I got to put him in that school. All the other schools have to change.
Yeah, so I think this is a better solution from the bottom of it. It provides more freedom. I don't have to force other people's kids with my view of what the good life looks like. And then no one gets to force my kids to learn in a certain way. And that's currently happening with the status quo. It's, you have those people who are picked by the teachers unions who win the school board races to determine what is taught in the public schools. And then also in the state house, it's always a one size fits all disaster that by definition isn't going to meet the needs of individual families and individual kids. But to get back to why Republicans haven't done it historically, I think it's the argument has changed a little bit, but also I think for a long time, school choice advocacy has made a mistake in pushing for very low income targeted programs that could be seen as a welfare program to some Republicans. Now we've been pushing more for universal, every single family, no income caps. This gets our side more pumped up to support the policy, and going big does nothing to change the fear mongering from the teachers unions. They come out swinging against it and fear mongering, whether it's 1% or 100%. So you might as well go all in and empower all families. And we've also previously kind of tried to make the bipartisan case for school choice, saying that, and it's true that it should be a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue, because it's an equalizer. It allows for more families to have opportunities. It's just like Pell Grants for college. Democrats.
So let's not walk down that road. I want to stay at the local thing for a moment. And before I go there, we were just talking about things like CRT and stuff like that. If identity politics is important to you, I have something you can do that can help this show out. You can head over to theadvocates.org, our sponsors. Yes, head over to our sponsors. They have a very special survey there if you want to, a single issue survey called the Identity Politics and Political Correctness Survey. So do me a favor, it's free. Head on over there, guys. If you're watching, if you're listening, theadvocates.org, go to the surveys, find that one, take that survey. It's like 5 or 6 minutes, but it's free. Just take it. And then if you would, share your results. If you share your results, what will happen? People will want to talk about it. You'll have good conversations about this. It will help everybody move this forward. So please support my sponsors, theadvocates.org. Take their identity, politics, and political correctness survey. Post your results, whether it's Twitter, YouTube, whatever it is. Do that to help us out. It's going to help tremendously. Now, if you like what Corey's saying, you don't have to only watch him here. I hope you do. But you can also check him out what he's doing. Check him out on Twitter at DeAngelis Corey. And that's DeAngelis, Corey, Corey. Check that out if you're just listening and not watching. Or you can check him out at his website, federationforchildren.org. And that 4 is not the number. It is the word FOR. Sorry to do a little homework there. I just want to make sure I got some stuff going on here. Corey, I want to go back, if I could, though, to what you were talking about the Republicans not rock and rolling as much. I'm glad they are now, right? I am. And I think that Democrats should jump on board. But you brought up a very important point. In the past, it's been seen as a class issue, right? It's been seen as a class issue. But now with universal, everybody can get it. That's good.
Sure.
Isn't there going to be pushback? And someone's going to say, Corey, see, now you're making sure all, the cool, rich, white kids get everything, and you're racist and you don't care about the poor kids. And isn't this now going to hurt the poor? Isn't that going to be the argument? You're hurting the poor kids or the Hispanic kids or the black and brown kids. Yep. Isn't that going to be the argument?
They make that argument whether you target the program or whether you don't target the program.
Okay,
and it's an argument that applies to the status quo, which is common with the anti-school choice arguments. They apply even stronger to the government school system. Public schools are not equal. They're not society's equalizer, despite what you hear from the teachers unions. You have the rich have access to the best public schools in Texas. I live in Texas now. Finally got myself out of the swamp from D.C. And there's school districts that actually charge tuition if you're on the wrong side of the district line. So if you live here and you want to go to this so-called public school, they're actually charging families a tuition at a public school, which I'm okay with the idea of tuition. But if you're supposed to be open to the public and, this is for everybody, you really shouldn't call yourself a public institution. Absolutely. That's why I like to call them government schools. But there's, trapping kids in these institutions that are failing them disproportionately, the least advantaged kids, that is an equity in the current system. I would venture to say that there is some systemic racism in the public school system. If you look at the disproportionate outcomes that we've seen over decades with New
York City has some of the most segregated schools in the country.
Yeah. And if you look at the evidence, school vouchers historically have led to integration, not segregation, 100%. Because the government schools are already so segregated. I mean, there's 9 or so studies on the topic, and all but one of them have found that giving families a choice leads to more racial integration, not less. And historically speaking, some people try to say that vouchers were tied to the segregation movement in the 50s. They get the history wrong, first of all, because there have been voucher programs in the U.S. well before the 1950s. You had town tuitioning programs in Maine and Vermont in the late 1800s, well before the 1950s. But also in the 1950s, you had staunch segregationists in Virginia siding with the teachers unions to oppose private school vouchers because they knew that what Milton Friedman theorized, that, this is actually going to lead to integration. Right. We should trap those kids in these schools. We don't want them coming to our schools. Right. And so the opponents of school choice get the history wrong. They get the logic wrong. And I
like what you're saying. Let me grab a couple comments if I could. Avi says, New York State is a sucker's paradise. Pay more, get less, no options or alternatives. We are an embarrassment to humanity. I don't know about humanity, but for sure the country. That's for sure. I think he's right there. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Texas has problems, but it can't be worse than New York. Can it be? I mean, is it? New York's pretty bad, isn't it?
No, but Texas doesn't have any private school choice programs yet. It's going to happen this session. I just moved here, and I'll be at the Capitol much more often. And the Texas Teachers Union, although they blocked me on Twitter, they can't block me in real life. I'll be giving them heck at the state capitol. And there's been a huge surge in support for the concept over the past couple of years, and it has
Awesome.
become a GOP litmus test issue.
So James says, and James is in New York right now. So is Avi, by the way. That's okay. I took mine out to homeschool. My youngest was failing, but was pushed through twice to struggle worse. I've heard that story so many times. I held him back last year. Now he's nailing 80s, 90s, and had his first 100 ever on a test. I love that.
Oh.
That's so good. This goes to your point, Corey. You're like, parents want to help their kids, and they want to do what's right for their kids, and they will. I pulled my daughter out for a year or two of homeschooling. She went back to school better than ever. I mean, she was stronger when she went back to school.
Yeah, and this is another silver lining of the pandemic. We talked a lot about school choice victories. I mean, we had Supreme Court victories too, but also homeschooling. Families started to see that their kids can learn more at a fraction of the time. Their kids are happier, less anxious, less bullying. There's a lot of negative forms of socialization that happen at government schools.
Absolutely.
Even in the ones I went to here in San Antonio, Texas, there was drugs around. That was kind of the cool thing to do. If you were in a gang, that was the cool thing. Those are negative forms of socialization. I was luckily able to avoid a lot of that stuff, despite it being around me in the school system. But homeschoolers can experience a lot of positive forms of socialization and learn much more efficiently through self-directed means as well, instead of having it forced into your brain from one period to the next in the factory model school system.
Absolutely. Dave says, in Iowa, a teacher's salary is somewhere between $35,000, starting out to over $50,000. Principals and superintendents make much more. It costs about $10,000 per student at 25 classrooms. Do the math. 25 per classroom.
Yeah. Where's the money going?
Yes, but the thing is, in New York State, our teachers are doing well. It's a living wage. It's not great, but it's a living wage. Most teachers in New York State make around $70,000 to $80,000 a year, which New York's an expensive state. But that's a living wage, right? I'd like them to make more. But our administrators, to your point, make $300,000, $400,000, or $500,000 a year. That's more than a living wage. So yes, absolutely.
And Iowa's going to get school choice this year. This is one of the top states on my radar. Texas, obviously, I live here, and it has the best shot it's ever had. And Texas is the crown jewel because it's just so big. I mean, everything's bigger in Texas. But Iowa, Governor Kim Reynolds is a huge supporter of school choice. She went out and kicked butt in the House primaries. So little background story. Iowa Senate passed an education savings account bill this year. Easily. All Republicans except for one voted for it. So it was easily passed the Senate. Made it way over to the House. 60% of the House members, 60 out of the 100, had R's next to their name, but they could not get it done. They couldn't get a majority to pass the governor's ESA bill, school choice bill. So she went out and endorsed 9 candidates, took out, all of her endorsements won. 5 of the incumbents who would not vote for her bill got kicked out of office as well. And so it looks like we have the votes for school choice in Iowa this year. It's not a matter of if they're going to do it, but how big they're going to go. Hopefully they go all in like Arizona.
There we go. Dan says, the teachers' unions are awful. Their actions have resulted in little to no accountability for teachers or students. Just a big clique of unprofessional professionals in our schools. I'll give you a quick story when I ran for governor. I showed up at the teachers union's annual convention when they were deciding who they're going to endorse. So I went there saying, hey, there was an endorsement, meeting. I said, can I please go in and speak to the members? They went, no. I said, but I'm running for governor. I'm on the ballot. This was 2018. I was on the ballot ready. I said, I'm on the ballot. Can I speak to them? They went, no. I said, but you're going to decide who you're going to endorse. They went, yes. I said, so I'm on the ballot. Can I speak to them? It's not like I think you're going to endorse me, right? It's like I think, oh my God, libertarian, you win. No, I just want to have the right of having a conversation. You're a major union, the most powerful union in my entire state, hands down, right? And New York is the most unionized state of all the states. And the teachers union is the most powerful union of our state. And I said, let me just talk. They went, no, just no, not even a fine. Let's go through the motions because we should. No, just wouldn't let me speak. And I was physically there. It's terrible.
You can't haunt them with the truth.
Exactly right. Avi says, the fact that school choice isn't mandated on a national scale is a crime against families. Avi, all about crimes. Okay, The fact that our taxes pay for education, and yet our choices are so limited, is an insult to taxpayers and shows that our elected officials use us as serfs and that we are subservient to them. This is not how a free people should be treated by those that are paid to serve them and their interests. Well, I want to go to what you talk about, right? You actually very often, Corey, you link this almost, or I should say link it. You compare this to our other things like Medicare or food stamps. And you say, when we give money for those two things, we don't tell you, we give you choice, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't force low-income families to spend their food stamp dollars at a residentially assigned government-run hospital. That wouldn't make any sense. Whether you're for or against food stamps and the amount of funding that we allocate towards it, I think we can all agree that if we're going to spend the money, it should go to people, and they should be able to take the funding to private providers. You shouldn't have to go get government cheese from a residentially assigned government provider. Same thing with higher education. We have Pell Grants. You can take the scholarships to the public university, government one, or you could take it to a private religious or non-religious university. Same thing with pre-K programs like Head Start. You can take the funding to the provider you want. Food stamps, Section 8 housing vouchers. You don't have to go to government housing. You can go to a private provider of housing. And so we do this with basically everything else. And the people who rail against school choice, who are elected officials, all of them basically support all of these other initiatives that fund people and give people a choice as opposed to funding buildings. And the difference is that the only difference that I can see is one of power dynamics. Choice is the norm for everything else, but choice is a threat to an entrenched special interest only when it comes to K-12 education. That's why you have some elected officials voting for Pell Grants and voting for pre-K programs, but then they vote against choice for the between years of K-12. It's because the teachers unions want to keep the money going to their institutions. That's the only logical explanation.
Well, what about the fear that I hear, right? That if we do this, then there's going to be a bunch of schools that like hate some people, right? So there's going to be schools that hate gay kids, and there's going to be the anti-gay school, and we don't want that. There's going to be the anti-Mexican school or something, right? It's going to be that type of thing. And then we're going to have, government vouchers paying for these evil schools. You've got to hear that as an argument that that's going to happen, right? I just lost your sound. I can't hear you. Hold on. Is it me? Maybe it's me. Hold on. Could I have just lost my sound? Let me find out here. Let me just make sure that I have not lost my sound. But all of a sudden I can't hear you. It could be me. It is possible. Let me ask my chat. Guys, can you hear him or can you hear me? Did I miss something? And my chat will tell me in a couple seconds whether or not it's me or not, because it could be me. I may have lost something. No, I still hear it. I hear it. I still have sound. There we go. My chat just told me they can hear me, but they can't hear you. You've done something different, Corey. I don't know what you've done, but you've done something different. It is on your end. Yeah, everyone's saying, did he mute himself? Guys, give me a couple of seconds while we fix this. We will work on this so that we can fix this. Give me a couple of seconds and he will work on it. I'm sure he will find a very cool thing to do. He might have to come back in and come back out. So I will grab some of your comments while we're here. And guys, thank you, chat, so much for telling me what's going on. So now I knew it wasn't me because I thought it might have been me. Let me go ahead down a couple more of these if I could. Sam says, no matter what state you're in, 90+% of teachers / school staff are leftists. I have seen that before. I have. I've seen many. But I'm not sure, Sam. Is it chicken or egg, right? Did they become that way because all the non-leftists left and walked away, or because no one else would join, right? So did non-leftists join and then leave, or the reverse? Did all of a sudden, did no one who wasn't leftist, did they not join? So I'm not sure which one actually came first, but it's an interesting point. So I'll grab a couple more of these here. Tom says, it's pretty simple. What's wrong with K-12 competition? Yes, We have competition in preschool, higher education. Oh, you're right, John. People argue and fight back and forth for preschool all day long, right? Constantly. But not for the other ones, right? Not for other ones. And college obviously is competitive. So, but that's it. Good point. We should do both. So the scientific libertarian, CRT was already being destroyed at the local level. The state coming in and banning CRT didn't effectively do anything. It's feel-good legislation. You're right, but there's something else, though, and this is Corey's point from earlier. Corey's seen that if a local school administrator or teachers, if they actually want to do CRT, to teach CRT, they're going to. They'll call it something else, whatever the case may be. If the parents want it, I mean, that's my point, right? People have asked me things like, Larry, what do you do about CRT? I don't think it's a good idea. I didn't like the way my kids were treated with it. My kids are mixed race, and it did not go well for them when you have to put people in a racial box. So it did not go well for my children. So I did not like that at all. However, if you think that CRT is a good idea, you can teach your kids it anyway, right? It's what you're going to teach your kids in your household. So I can't stop you. So why would I? Allow parents to teach their kids what they don't teach their kids. I think in the long run, we'll find out what's going wrong and what's going right. That's where my head is on that. I know some of you would disagree with that. The scientific libertarian also goes on to say, the rich kids are already going to private schools. The wealthy are already okay. You're totally right. If you're wealthy, you're all good, right? You'll go to whatever school you want to go to. It doesn't really matter. So yes, absolutely. You're totally correct. Yes. Brian says, CRT would be fine if it actually taught critical thinking, but that would defeat its own purpose. Let me walk that road. I've done it before a couple of times, but I will bring it up. Hey, Corey, you back?
I think this might work now.
I hear you. Yes, it does work. There we go. Absolutely. I'm glad you're back. So I have a question for you off the bat. You walked in the door. Here it is. Does Corey believe that abolishing the Department of Education would be a benefit? And if so, how so?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. Okay. Did you get that question?
No, but I did want to respond to the question that I was trying to respond to right when I got cut out.
Okay. Do that one first, then I'll give you this one. Go ahead.
Yeah. So like this is a case. So to reiterate for the audience, your question was basically, what about these schools that could sprout up that, anti-LGBT schools,
right.
Schools that could teach hate. This is a case of using an outlier to try to dictate policy, which some of this stuff could happen in the government school system. Do people say that, oh, well, we found one example of hate being taught in a public school? Does that mean that we should destroy all public schools because there's an example of it happening in a very rare case? No one says that, but it could be that the government steps in after the case to try to prevent things like that from happening.
Okay.
So like people will try to make this argument to try to outlaw homeschooling. Some people will say, oh, well, this could lead to forms of abuse on the part of the parents. It's like, yeah, that might happen. That also happens in public schools. There's abuse that happens, but you deal with it after the fact. You don't infringe on people's individual rights to make choices beforehand. No one wants abuse to happen. But you don't tell people, we're not going to allow anybody to choose their food at the grocery store because some parents might choose the wrong food for their kids.
Oh, right.
But if there is neglect or abuse happening, then the government should step in after the case. Otherwise, it's a Fourth Amendment violation in my view. And then if you look at surveys from GLSN, they did a 2017, 2018, or 2019, I don't remember the year, survey, a national survey, just asking students who were identified as LGBTQ in the school system, public and private, asked, how do you feel when it comes to bullying in your school? The private school LGBTQ students reported higher levels of being satisfied when it comes to the issue of bullying than the kids in the government-run schools. So this might not be a perfect solution, but it could be an incremental solution. Giving families more choices, regardless of your background, should be a step forward, not backward.
So it's harm reduction no matter what, right? No matter what, we got harm reduction.
Yeah, we should increase choices. No one's calling to abolish all the default options. So you can still have the public school too.
All right. Shelly says, my cousin is a school superintendent in Texas. Unlike New York, she's a superintendent of the entire county's schools. I wonder if that skews the numbers. I just don't know, but in Manhattan, we actually have in one building, we'll have, I'm not joking, 6 high schools in one building. So there'll be 2 floors or 1 floor, that's a high school. And there'll be like 100 kids maybe in the entire high school, maybe, and they'll have a principal and a vice principal and a whole deal. The amount of administrators in New York City, insane. How is it in Texas?
Yeah, so Texas, it's a little more spread out than that, but you have really tiny school districts where you have these people making more than the president with very small school districts. Texas has a total of, I want to say, about 1,100 school districts across the state. So there's a bunch of them. And whether you're a big school district or small school district, I don't know what the correlation is. I would expect bigger school districts have higher superintendent salaries. But I listed a bunch of them the other day, and people were pointing out that, well, this guy makes more than just about anybody else, and he has one of the smallest school districts. What's going on here? So I don't, when in the question, it seemed like that, there's a very, very small number of school districts in Texas. That's not true. There's like over 1,000 of them.
That's a lot. Absolutely. Tom is a fan. He says, my 2 favorites to listen to. Look at that. We got fans. I like that. Dan says, unions don't police their own. A union has a contract with the school to provide services. Why isn't the union legally responsible for the bad actions of the members? Great point, right?
Well, yeah. And look, a lot of the times the union's main benefit is to protect the least common denominator. New York City, you had the rubber rooms, people getting paid $1 million of taxpayer money to sit there and do nothing just so that they didn't hurt the kids in the school system. Just to keep them away from the kids.
Yes.
And
paying them to sit in the gym. Yes.
It's insane.
I got the wrong job, Corey. I want that job. I got the wrong job. I can go sit in the gym and get paid. That's awesome. Yes.
Yeah, it's like you're being rewarded for doing a bad job. You do such a bad job, you can't be around kids, and then they're relegating you to this, boring, thing, being by yourself, which is totally boring. But you're not having to work really.
Yeah, but I can play play Minecraft or something.
Whatever.
Like
yeah, exactly.
It's fine. I love it. It's good. Whatever. Fortnite. Whatever's the cool thing. Sam says, I did learn a lot in my Masters of Science and Education program. Unfortunately, what I learned was leftist propaganda and ideology. I walked out the first day and heard math is racist in 2009. Wow. I thought that was a more recent thing. That's like 13 years ago. This has been going on for a while.
Yeah, I think sunlight's the best disinfectant. People are just started to see it a lot more recently. And you pointed out earlier that, allowing for alternative certification or allowing the schools to determine who to hire could be helpful. I think that makes most sense to people. It makes most sense with the research. But I think this question kind of gets to that, in that it's not about determining who's the most qualified candidate. It's not about providing more options for employees and employers and families. It's more about having those employees go through a system of indoctrination to instill those values to the children in the school. So it's not about how good of a teacher you are. I think it's more about indoctrination starting at the top. And
absolutely,
there's not an easy way to fix that. I mean, defund the universities or just provide for alternative pathways to certification.
So Joel says Corey isn't dropping as many F-bombs as Rome did on last night's show. Yes, I had a show last night with one guy, very entertaining guy, love him, but man, bit of potty mouth on him. He was F-bombing left and right. MF.
I got close when the mic stopped working.
There we go.
So you wouldn't have heard it anyway.
I wish you'd have popped up and heard a couple F-bombs. Would have been funny. So yes. The question that Alexander had earlier, which I want to bring up, is, does Corey believe that abolishing the Department of Education would be a benefit? And if so, how?
It should have never been born in 1979. The word education is not found in the U.S. Constitution. We should not have a federal Department of Education. And it was made with the explicit goal of closing the achievement gap. It hasn't done that. If anything, the achievement gap has gotten worse. We've fumbled over $1 trillion in federal education spending since 1979 in the system. And it hasn't really done anything but create more red tape. And why not give that money back to the states? It's not like the money is just going to disappear if we abolish the department. So give the money back to the states in the form of block grants, and let the states determine what to do with it. And if there's, if a school is being discriminatory or something and going against federal law, well, then, that looks a lot different than having this huge Department of Education where they're tying strings to a bunch of funding and not really providing a bunch of benefit. And look, this was also created as a payoff to the teachers unions as well. And they're kind of getting what they wanted out of it.
I'm someone who's old enough to have gone to school before 1980. And some people on my in my chat who are watching and listening have also old enough to have gone to school before 1980. Somehow we all learned how to read and write and survive and get everything done prior to a the Department of Education. And I would argue, would anybody say that education since 1980 has gotten so much better? I'm not sure people would argue that. So your point is very valid, if that makes any sense. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and if the next president is on here listening to the podcast, whoever that may be, if you need an education secretary, I'll throw my hat in the ring. I will be an easy person to manage. I'll fire myself on the first day, and you won't have to think about me anymore.
There we go. Done deal. Easy day. Easiest hire ever. Jocelyn says, thanks for having Mr. DeAngelis on. Followed his work for a while now. You've got some fans.
Boom. Thanks.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Shelley says, another issue with my school district is they spend all the special education funding on low-performing students and not on high-performing students who are also special education. So I want to bring this piece up because the other thing you're going to find is, I'm sure, is people saying, Corey, if you do this, no one's going to deal with special needs kids, right? How are you going to deal with the special needs kids? And I feel like Shelley's saying the opposite, but what do you say to that?
Yeah, so the special needs kids are the least well served by a one-size-fits-all system. They have unique needs that are most well suited to be dealt with individualized providers. And if you think about it, we already have a form of school choice at the federal level in IDEA, the Individuals for Disabilities Education Act. And what it says is if your assigned school is not meeting your special need, whatever that may be, as it's defined under IDEA, then they are violating your IDEA rights, and you can actually make the argument that the public school district has to pay for you to send your kid to a private school that does meet their individual needs. And the thing is, this is just it's just like everything else at the federal level. It's a lot of hoops. Who are the parents who are most likely to be able to go fight this in court against the school district and who have the most resources to be able to do that? It's the most advantaged families. Instead, we should say every student is unique. Let the family decide and not have to prove it in court and pass school choice for everybody, regardless.
I literally see this in New York City all the time. The wealthier parents who have special needs kids sue the city and or the state. But the problem is, to your point, it takes a year to go through court. So what do you do with your kid in that first year or so? Well, they're wealthy, or they're good, so they can take out loans, or they can afford to pay, and literally the state writes them a reimbursement check. That's how that actually works. So they'll drop, I'm not making these numbers up, in New York City, 50, 60, 70 grand for 1 year for a private specialized school. I'm not joking. Those numbers are real numbers. You can check them out. Who can front 60 grand for one kid? Well, a well-to-do family can. So they front the 60 grand, pay for their kid for a year, and to your point, pay for a lawyer to sue the state, and the state reimburses them everything after a year or so. You're not wealthy. You can't do that. That's impossible.
Yeah, and you can craft school choice legislation like they did in Arizona to have the funding based on what you would have gotten in the public schools. So if you're a student with special needs that got more money in the public schools, you'd have more of the funding following you at the same time. And that makes
Gotcha.
sense to me as well, because look, if you're in the public school system, we would have spent that amount of funding on that student anyway. And sometimes to make it fiscally beneficial, the bill will say like 90%. In Arizona, that's what they do. It's 90% of what you would have gotten. So the taxpayer saves some money, the family benefits because they get the choice, and then the
Sure.
school district benefits too if you create it in a way to where the school district keeps the locally raised property tax revenues, for example. And that's
Got it.
typically how it works with most of the programs. Try to create a
I like that.
win-win-win.
So, guys, I'm asking you, as always, if you like what we're doing here, do me a favor, support the show, and subscribe to the Sharpway YouTube page. You know, I have like 5 YouTube pages, whatever I have. I don't care. I'm asking for just this one. Go ahead and subscribe to the Sharpway YouTube page. Let that grow. I'm trying to make that grow so I can get around all those algorithms who are always beating me up. So please do that. And also, please support my sponsor in another easy way. If he's like, Larry, I took that survey you told me to take already because I love you and I did it already. Good. Then go to theadvocates.org and take the world's smallest political quiz. You can click that link that's in the description, or just go to theadvocates.org. Take something, share it. It doesn't matter. It makes them happy. It makes me happy. It supports the show, and it's free. And if you like him, what Corey's saying, you can support him too. You can head over to federationforchildren.org. Check out what's going on there. Support them if you like, or just follow him on Twitter. He'll be posting stuff. You can just watch and be cool with him. He's cool. He'll respond, actually. He does. DeAngelis Corey over at Twitter. So I want to grab a couple more comments if I could. A lot of people are popping in. I just grab a couple more if we could. Not that many of them. By the way, they now can hear everybody, so we're good. All right. Yes. Hold on here. Dan says, telling people how they can spend their food stamp is going to happen soon. And farmers will have to produce and document they produce it according to strict rules or be shut out of the market. So Dan's worried that the opposite's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's a good point. Are we worried that now that we've had so much of an advance that there'll be a backlash that may make things worse? Is that a real fear or no?
Yeah. So like I'll ask this rhetorical question on Twitter very often when people say public money, public schools, and then I'll list all these other programs where public money, which it's taxpayer money. There's no such thing as public dollars.
Right.
That can be used at private institutions. And I'll say, well, do you think that low-income families should be forced to take that public money to a government grocery store? And then some third-party commenters, probably a libertarian most of the time, will say, don't give them any ideas. And it's like,
right.
Actually, yeah, you might have a point, but I think although that those ideas might be in the head of some socialists, it's not a very popular idea. Most people don't agree with it. So even if they might push for it, it's very unpopular. They're not going to be able to make a very convincing argument to get it implemented. And at the same time, people who are benefiting from these programs are now essentially a form of a special interest who will fight like hell against those liberties being taken away from them to have them only shop at government institutions.
Well, Lisa brings up a point. She says the fact that administrators make more than teachers is completely nonsensical to me. And I agree, because aren't you now saying some teacher who's a savvy person says, wait a minute, I can be a teacher, get bullied by my administrators, and make less money. And if I'm a good teacher, I get no benefit. I still get bullied and I still make less money. Or I can just say the hell with teaching thing and become an administrator. And now I'm the bully and I'm making more money.
That's their way up. That's their way up. You know, there's not an incentive to be a better teacher. So they just move to try to get into an administrative position. And so you can have some of the best teachers getting out of the classroom because of the perverse incentives that are kind of included in the current system. So yeah, I mean, this is another reason why I think these ESAs are a good idea. You can have the funding go directly from that savings account from the parent to a teacher in a micro school. You can have a smaller class size, no red tape. You can kind of create your own school, basically.
And for special needs kids, I feel like that's the home run, right? If my kid's special, particularly if I'm in more of it isn't as difficult in a large city like New York City. There are tons and tons of people, so therefore tons of special needs kids, right? By percentage, there's a whole lot more of them. You can put them into the right schools, but you live in a more suburban or rural area, there may be very few kids with your kids' special needs, right? You may have to have a micro school because there simply aren't that many kids with your kids' special needs. This feels like the best of both worlds here.
Yeah, that's right. And the main argument we're seeing against school choice, since it's mostly passing in red states right now, in 2023, I think it's going to be another banner year for school choice. We're hearing the teachers union repeating a same old talking point we've heard in these states before, which is, these other states have school choice and the Republicans voted for it, but our Republicans get a pass. We don't have to vote for it because we're in Texas and we have rural areas. As if that has anything to do. I mean, so with these education savings accounts, you can benefit from school choice in a rural area. You can use it for online learning, micro schools, a private school if one is in your area. But then the top 9 rural states in the country, according to U.S. Census Bureau data, all have some form of private school choice already. Think about West Virginia. West Virginia is a super rural state. They have the second most expansive school choice education savings account program in the nation. They're fine. They're right behind Arizona as far as top states for private school choice programs. And the Maine and Vermont, they have private school choice programs that were designed
and they're rural.
Yeah, and they're very rural states, and the programs were created because they had so many rural areas. Right. Some rural areas in those states didn't have any public schools, so the state gave them a voucher to go to another public school in another district or a private school. So this whole, rural states can't have school choice, it's just not true historically. And it's just a weak argument because they'll turn around and they'll say, we can't use it, but at the same time, it's going to destroy our schools. But wait, which one is it? If you can't use it, it's not going to destroy your school. If anything, you have the weakest argument against school choice, not the strongest.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, Corey, before I let you run, is there anything that I should have brought up that I didn't, something that you want to chat about or let the audience know about?
Yeah, just one last thing. I think school choice is a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue when you look at the voters. I mean, super majorities of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats support it, according to Real Clear Opinion research in 2022. And the way to get there, though, I don't think it's about pretending it's a bipartisan or nonpartisan thing among elected officials. It's by making it hyper-partisan in the short run and making it politically disastrous for Democrats to oppose it. So, like, you have Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. He changed his education platform 2 months before the election to include school choice. He's always been against it, or he's been on the side of the teachers unions. I think he was reading the tea leaves, and some people, like conservatives, were on my Twitter saying, why are you supporting Josh Shapiro? Why are you giving him credit? He's just lying about it. He's just, kind of signaling for support. My response was something that Milton Friedman said very well, which was, it's not about getting the right people into office. It's about making it politically profitable for the wrong people to do the right things. Yes. And the political winds have shifted, and that high-profile Democrats are starting to say, well, maybe I should support this too. Yep. Doesn't matter why. It's good news for parents in the end.
I always say that, most of the people that we think are evil aren't evil. They're just apathetic. They just don't care. They want to stay in power. That's all that matters. They don't actually care about any of your policies. I want to stay in power. Oh, this policy gets me in power. I like this policy. This policy keeps me elected. I like this policy. I think you're totally right. Well, Corey, I want to say thank you so much for coming tonight. It was great. I mean, I think my chat loved you. The people loved it. It was awesome. Guys, again, if you want to follow Corey, please check him out. federationforchildren.org. The links are in the description if you want to check him out. Follow him on Twitter, DeAngelis Corey. Guys, thank you so much for watching this evening. I appreciate it. Corey, thank you for coming. Everybody, I will be on tomorrow. I told you it is Education Week. This afternoon, we had on someone who ran for education department in Texas. Today, we have Corey. And tomorrow, we have the woman who wrote Homeschool Hacks. She's going to be on tomorrow.